Hi there, my name is Adrian Auler. I'm going to be talking to you about the use of Ibogaine in the treatment of heroin addiction. So I'm not going to be focusing exclusively on the entheogen Ibogaine, but on its use in the treatment of opiate addiction. If you read my profile, my primary credential for being able to talk about this is extensive personal, intimate experience of addiction and Ibogaine. So, I want to go to...
You could just press the space bar when you want to go out the slides.
The motivation for this talk is the inefficiency and the poor success rate of addiction treatment modalities, which has traditionally had a failure rate of 95%. That is to say, addicts treated in the old modalities relapse within 6 months. 95% of them relapse within 6 months after treatment. So obviously that's not very effective. With each relapse, the addict who already has a very poor self-image becomes increasingly morose and feels worse about themselves, feels more like a loser. So it's not a very compassionate situation if we continue to do something that doesn't work. In 1956, when Burroughs wrote Junkie, there were maybe 20,000 heroin addicts in the United States, all in New York City. Now there's well over 500,000 in almost all major cities. So it's a growing problem. Addiction in general is growing, but I'm trying to keep my focus here specifically on opiate addiction. So I was an addict for 22 years. And after the first 5 years, I started trying to escape from my addiction, and I went to 14 different treatment programs over the course of 17 years, and relapsed every time. Each of those programs, most of them, had some good piece of the puzzle, but not all of it. And they had different strengths and weaknesses. I got clean every time, but when I left the program, there was the same pain that I had started using to cover up in the first place, just waiting for me. And of course it got worse over time. So most of the old treatment modalities really are coming out of the biomedical model, which is ultimately grounded in the reductionist worldview of scientific materialism. So they view the body as a collection of functioning, molecules and organs and so forth, and consciousness is simply a byproduct of the functioning of the brain. So with such a worldview, inevitably some piece of the complex puzzle of addiction is going to be overlooked. Usually they just detoxify your body and give you some kind of counseling. Yeah, I had the biomedical model derives from scientific materialism. Okay, so they view the human body as a biological machine, a collection of body parts working together to produce behavior. There's a book called The End of Modern Medicine, Biomedical Science Under the Microscope, where the author uses the phrase, their attitude is, you could just come by the clinic and drop off your body and go shopping and come back later. It's like an auto shop, right? And we'll fix it for you. As if the interaction of your consciousness, your hopes, your emotions with your body has no influence on the functioning of the body. So I take that as being the reason that the failure rate of traditional treatment modalities is so dreadful. So after I'm coming from the new paradigm. I'm a fourth wave psychologist working with transpersonal and integral psychology, and I inhabit an ensouled universe that is an energetic one, just various modes of energy. Consciousness is a part of that. And so what I feel to be the successful approach to addiction treatment is going to be related to the new field of energy medicine, or relatively new. I mean, it's been around for a long time, of course, but it's a new thing for the Western consciousness and society. So I just grabbed this off of Google Images. There were many different images I could show, but the point is that our body, our total body, is a much larger and invisible energetic structure than we can see with just the physical body. And so my thesis is that, as you probably know from very popular 12-step terminology, addiction is a progressive disease. So as it progresses, it metastasizes like a cancer, spreading out to toxify and poison all of our energetic levels. So if you go to some program that only addresses some of those levels, then the situation is like going to a doctor to get a boil lanced without addressing the underlying disease that created the boil in the first place. Obviously, in that situation, when you leave, it's only a question of time before you have another boil. And similarly for the addict, once they leave treatment, it's only a question of time before they relapse because they're still sick. There's still something imbalanced and unhealthy. They're in a state of dis-ease, and they're going to return to their escapist behavior, which is, their addictive behavior. So just a little background. Ibogaine is the least well-known and popular of the entheogens. Most people have heard of it pretty much exclusively in terms of its efficacy in treating addiction. But one reason is that it's not from the Americas. It's an African sacred medicine from the Bight of Africa, and Cameroon, Gabon, and the Republic of Congo. It's used as the sacred medicine in the Bwiti cult of the Fang peoples, who in fact aren't from there. They were part of the first Bantu expansion, and they migrated from further north where there were savanna peoples, and they were forced, by forces with other people around them to migrate, and they found themselves in an equatorial jungle environment. So they didn't know how to live there, and they went to the masters of the jungle, the pygmy, and asked them, how do you live in this environment? And the pygmy told them, eat this root. It will show you. So that's where it's from. My experience with Ibogaine, I was part of Dr. Mash's clinical trials, human clinical trials, testing Ibogaine to try to get it admitted into the American Pharmacopoeia. It wasn't a treatment center really, I was a test subject. But when she wanted to get Ibogaine, she went to Gabon, where almost the entire nation completely venerates the sacred medicine, and went to the Minister of Interior asking if she could get some Ibogaine to take out for these trials, and she had to plead her case before him because his attitude was like, why should we give our sacred medicine to some profane Westerner who knows what you're going to do with it? So she convinced him that her motives were good, and was allowed to establish a plant there, a factory, for the extraction of the Ibogaine alkaloid from the shrub, so long as it was done on Gabonese soil and staffed entirely by Gabonese, so they'd be working with their sacred medicine. So she got some very high quality Ibogaine. So Ibogaine comes from the shrub Iboga tabernath, and there's just some representations of it there. But the Ibogaine comes from the root bark, not the rest of the plant. And this is an interesting thesis that I have. And there are some molecular representations of Ibogaine. It's a very interesting and unusual molecule. It's not like the tryptamines. It's actually kind of like you were taking a tryptamine entheogen like psilocybin or ayahuasca, plus salvinorum A, which connects to opiate receptors, plus ketamine altogether. So it has a dissociative quality, and it influences several different kinds of receptors, and it attaches throughout the body. So all researchers of Ibogaine agree that we still don't have really a complete picture at all about where it goes and what it does. It's very complex. It is not a party drug, however. It's a very internal, personal experience, and you're generally in a dissociative state. It's not at all social, and you're involved in your own personal introspection. So, although we did not chew the root bark as the Buitists do, Dr. Mash had purified Ibogaine alkaloid, and when I saw it, it reminded me of back in the day taking mescaline. We had a big horse cap, and there were very large crystals of a sort of amber color. Even though it was purified alkaloid, and like coca, there are several alkaloids in the root bark. Ibogaine is the primary one. Even though she had extracted the primary alkaloid from the plant, and we took it separately, plant teacher was still there. So I got the chance to go to St. Kitts in the Caribbean, where Dr. Mash was conducting these trials. And at that time, I was just about dead from 22 years of heroin addiction. Most of the other entheogens recommend a preparation to take the entheogen in a sacred manner. There's usually some diet, refraining from sex, things of this nature. But for treating addicts, that's all impossible. I used, right up to the day before, I did the Ibogaine. So Ibogaine is unique in that it's like a Statue of Liberty, you know, for addicts, saying, bring me your toxic, your trashed, your half-dead addict, and I'll take them anyway and still fix them up. So in this case, plant teacher was actually plant doctor. It entered in to me and did a diagnosis and prescribed a particular experience for me. I was treated with another young man next to me, and of course, Dr. Mash used the same dose to body rate, you know, formula for all of us. He had a very different experience, and unfortunately, he died a few years later from relapsing. But I'm here. So one reason is that I surrendered entirely to the experience. I didn't have a choice. I was dying anyway. So when Dr. Mash said there could be some danger involved, it was hard not to laugh. It's like you're standing in front of the firing squad and they say, ready, aim, and somebody says, wait a minute, you could get out of this, but it might be dangerous. So bring it on. So I had this experience. The Ibogaine experience takes place in two phases. The first is the so-called visualization phase, and the second is the integrated phase. For me, I was older. By the time I got to the island, I was 6 weeks short of my 48th birthday. I was very toxic. I've been using for a long time. So the experience was kind of like being run over by a tank. It took about 18 hours. So each of the two phases was about 9 hours each. And my body laid there like a sack of cement. I did not move around at all. It was very internal. I had to be helped by 2 or 3 nurses to get up and go to the bathroom at one point. So there was, most of the visualization for me was actually connected with music that I was listening to. They gave us various ambient music and so forth. And after a few hours I decided to stop listening to it and most of the visualization stopped. Nevertheless, I had a very distinct sense that there was a great deal going on. I felt that I was getting a high-speed information dump from the universe. The only classically described experience for Ibogaine, which does happen to a quarter to a third of most people, is that you can actually see your life like a film clip from birth up to present and review it if you wish. It shows you where your trauma occurred, where your bad decisions took place, but the volume knob on emotion is turned way down so you're not freaking out again as you did in the first place. But that did not happen for me. Oh, well, here's a comparison of Ibogaine treatment with a variety of other addiction treatments. Ibogaine is over on the right. You can see that it scores very high marks in all cases as compared to the others. I tried most of them myself in those 14 different programs that I went to. Some of them sucked, some of them were okay, but in no case was I fully treated when I left the program. So this I just put together based on my experience. So Dr. Mash was conducting these trials. This was incidentally represents the second of about 4 phases of Ibogaine research since Howard Lotsof first discovered anecdotally that Ibogaine is effective for treating opiate addiction. So it was conducted on the island of St. Kitts in the Caribbean, because of course it's illegal here. When I finished, it was a 2-week program on the island, and in the exit counseling I took her advice and went to an excellent treatment program, which was 2 months inpatient in South Florida, which was near where Dr. Mash was. She was head of the Department of Neurology of the University of Miami School of Medicine at the time. And so I stayed in touch with her and with other Ibogainettes returning from the island, and we conducted a special discussion group because like everybody in recovery, in treatment, we were taken to 12-step meetings all the time, which were highly suggested and were very useful, but you can't talk about Ibogaine and your experience there in a 12-step meeting. So we had a special discussion group. So I got to talk to other Ibogainettes from the next 6 to 8 rounds of treatment over the next few years that Dr. Mash did and compare notes with them. Everybody that felt themselves to have had a positive and worthwhile experience all agreed that there was an inescapable sense of plant teacher, another, not me, vegetal consciousness that that came in and was present and prescribed the entire experience. So all of these things happen. So Ibogaine is, because it's a psychedelic, it's multidimensional, they're connected to the spirit realm, it is well positioned to address the multidimensional nature of our total energetic self and address all of these issues at the same time. So as you can see, the first ones are largely the personal elements. For me, of course, it was extremely toxic, and the Ibogaine squeezed me out like a tube of toothpaste. I won't even describe what came out of me when I went to the bathroom. It was pretty shocking. But Dr. Mash almost didn't treat me when I got to the island because she didn't think I had enough vital energy left to survive the treatment. I looked kind of like one of those fish that washes up on the beach. My heart, by that point, had shriveled up to like the little dried pea they used to put in a whistle. I was completely shut down in all respects and cut off from everyone and everything, from my sense of the sacred, from myself, for that matter. So Ibogaine addressed all of those things. And then, of course, human beings are not, and we're not an island. We are social beings, and such healthcare traditions as Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, and shamanism all recognize that we are situated within a matrix of our social milieu, and that has to be healthy as well for us to be happy, healthy, functioning human beings. So that was re-energized, and I mean, it was a starting situation. I had to do work after that, but all of this stuff was completely shut down for me, as it was for, you know, the other people on the island that I was treating with at the same time. And then the transpersonal issues, both up and down, if you will. Ibogaine in particular, in the Bwiti cult, is an ancestral drug, an ancestral connector, and also it situates the young Bwitist. It is used in high doses as an initiatory passage. And so it's a vision quest, and the young Bwitist is connected to Mother Africa, to the forest, and feels, you know, understands their position in Africa. Here we're talking about Westerners, addicts, a special category of people, taking it without the Bwiti container, and it's still highly effective. So we're just talking about the psychedelic sacred medicine. And even so, Dr. Mash and the people, the counselors with her, tried to create, you know, a very nurturing environment, but it did not have any of the, you know, the things common to the ancestral practice of the Bwitists in Gabon or Cameroon, and nevertheless they were highly effective. So I had, for instance, at one time had a spiritual practice and felt connected to the divine, but that was completely shut down by my addiction, and I felt reconnected thereafter to begin again. It was really a rebirth experience.
10 minutes, Adrian.
Thank you. Yeah. One image that I had in the visualization phase, and I can remember quite clearly, I found myself on the top of a structure like this, on the inside. And there's a, this is the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but it's a cylindrical structure with a spiral staircase on the inside, and I suddenly found myself at the top and began walking down, looking out the windows as I went, and it continued to ground level and continued to spiral down below that. And it continued to go down, and I started getting more and more anxious or nervous, and at some point I said, that's far enough, thank you, and I took off the eye shades and the earphones and whatnot and went on to do something else. More recently, in my education, I relate that to Jung's dream as a young man of being in a two-story house which represented his ancestral lineage, and he was on the second story, which was the way the decor represented his parents' generation, and when he went down to the first floor, he went back about 300 years or so, and when he went into the basement, it went to Roman times. When he went into the sub-basement, it was like prehistoric. So I related my experience to that, this is the reconnection with the ancestors, after all, whose bones are in the ground. So it's very much a part of the Bwiti cult. They walk barefoot on the ground. They feel connected with the soil of Mother Africa and with their ancestors whose bones are there. And they also have like a little structure in which some relics of ancestors' bones and stuff are kept. So I felt that this was my experience of that. that same kind of reconnection with an ancestral lineage. However, just within the past year, it suddenly dawned on me that the spiral staircase I was walking down was the DNA molecule. I started at the top, at the end that represents our humanity, and as I spiraled down, I was going back through our evolutionary history, and probably around the stage where I was approaching single-celled creatures, I started getting nervous and didn't want to go further. Maybe today I would choose differently, but at the time I was just trying to live. Yeah, there's Jung's dream of the house. So there's an evolutionary quality there, a reconnection. So an addict learns many lessons by classical conditioning repeatedly. Number one is avoid withdrawal at all costs. Do anything to avoid withdrawal. Every other treatment I went through, withdrawal was covered up to some extent or minimized, but inescapably you felt really badly while you were getting off of dope. But here, I used some narcotic the day before I went to treatment. I went into treatment, was given the Ibogaine probably mid-morning. The experience lasted all night long. And the next morning, I was assisted out of the treatment cabana. Of course, this is on St. Kitts. We were on the west coast, facing the Atlantic. As I was helped out into the morning light, you're in the westerlies there, the wind blows non-stop. It was as if my entire 22-year nightmare was just evaporating like dew off the grass, and I was completely freed without any withdrawal. And it was such, I was so filled with gratitude that I cried at the time. I had to be helped up to my cabana. And I remember that morning as if it was this morning. So it's a pretty miraculous affair where a single dose of a medicine can completely banish addiction if you are surrendered to the experience. I just came out of Susanna's talk. Dr. Mesh and I and some other people had conversations many times about the value of having an Ibogaine recovery house. Everybody who took the Ibogaine, even ones who didn't ultimately succeed, at first were in a very open and teachable and hopeful and optimistic state. The staff all got contact highs. Everybody was floating around like it was a very wonderful affair. But when we went back, even though we went to, I and some other people went to this particular treatment center, which was totally cool, nevertheless, we weren't like everybody else there. That's why we had that special discussion group. But it would have been wonderful to have a special treatment house just for people who had taken the Ibogaine and counselors and so forth who were experienced in working with those people, so that there could be a prolonged integrative period. The Ibogaine, incidentally, quickly metabolizes into nor-Ibogaine, which is very long-lasting. It stays in the body for weeks, even months afterwards, and so it supports you for a while. That's your window of opportunity to begin reconstructing a new life, a new behavioral motif, a new way of being in the world, so that when the natural medicine leaves you, you're up and running in a new direction, which is what I did.
3 minutes. I don't know if you want to do questions.
Okay, so that's all I can say at this time. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Adrian.
Okay.
No.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So that wonderful chart you put up about the reconstruction of your life life with relationships and all the dimensions that were not happening.
Here?
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, social and personal and transpersonal. How did you get all that together? Did you work more effectively with the program that you were in as a result of the window of opportunity that opened up with the Ibogaine, as opposed to the other people that didn't quite, you know, make it through?
Well, for instance, the young man who dosed next to me was half my age and had been strung out for 1/3 as long. He was a wonderful young chap. He had everything going for him. He was handsome and intelligent and clever and funny and whatnot. He grew overconfident, and I guess he undervalued or minimized the danger of relapse or the potency of established behavioral motifs, and eventually he relapsed and OD'd. I had the motivation of desperation. I was so close to death when I got treated that I knew absolutely I could not afford to relapse again. So I really put my nose to the grindstone. And in the 12-step program, there are many valuable sayings, and one of them is that if you chase your recovery the way you chased your drugs, you'll probably make out all right. So I did that. I worked very hard at my recovery for like 5 years. Before I finally felt that I could perhaps return to school. All this information I just put it together myself since then by my studies and by reflection and consideration and discussion with other addicts both in use and in recovery. So as I say, the Ibogaine, one thing that everybody recognizes, it made you very teachable. When you're an addict, you're completely locked down and rigid. You're like a marble rolling in a groove. You just can't get out of it. And so that flexibility and openness is a wonderful opportunity. You have to make use of it while it's there. If you haven't started, you know, when it goes away, you're not up and running in a new direction, you'll just fall back into that groove. I mean, I wore that groove for 22 years. It was very deep. So I definitely had to work hard to keep moving, but the opportunity was there. And, you know, the hope, the optimism, the inspiration that I could do it and that I was actually worth making the effort for. Yeah, it was all there.
That's it.
If you're interested in more information about addiction and about the Ibogaine, I have my story there at that website, and you can go there and read it. Thank you.